All right, here are just a few Zoom tips. So everybody here was automatically placed on mute when they entered the meeting. If you are going to be speaking or you'd like to say something, feel free to unmute yourself when it's your opportunity to talk. Sometimes Zoom logs you in with a different name than what you want to be seen as. If you want to rename yourself, there's a little screenshot here showing you how you can do that. You just click on your name and you can rename yourself if you want a different name to pop up. And then at the bottom of your screen, you should have some options for the chat feature. If you want to make comments during the presentation, you're welcome to do that. And you can also enable closed captioning if you need to see the captions for what everyone is saying on your screen. And just again, for the people who just joined us, this training is being recorded. If you have any questions or challenges with Zoom or the tech, you can drop a chat to myself, Nicole Johnson, or Mary Simons. All right, so I'm Nicole Johnson, and my colleague here, Mary, will introduce herself. We're technical assistance providers at Homebase. And what Homebase is, it's a bunch of folks who get together, some policy people, some attorneys, and just subject matter experts, in homeless services in general. And we are all dedicated to basically eradicating homelessness and its root causes. And we go around the country virtually right now, some of us in person, and we help teach different communities how to best serve the people that need them. Mary, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mary Simons. I'm a directing analyst here at Homebase. I have 20 years of experience in the field, working direct services and in a COC leadership role. So all the things we're talking about are things that I've done in practice, and I know Nicole has too. So we're really excited to be able to support you here today and answer any questions you may have as we go along.
Thanks, Mary. And again, I'm Nicole Johnson. I'm a senior staff attorney at Homebase. Prior to becoming an attorney, I was a case manager for quite a while in shelters in the DC area. I also identify as someone with lived experience of homelessness. I basically spent my entire childhood and early adult life experiencing chronic homelessness. So effective case management is the thing that I love talking and training people about the most. Is something that I think I have the most experience in my, both my personal life and my professional life. And if anybody here is a case manager coming from someone who has dealt with a whole lot of us over her lifetime, the work that you do matters. The way you come in and carry yourself every day matters. And even when it feels like nobody cares, you are absolutely making a difference in the lives of the families you're working with. We will jump in. So we're here because every person, every program has a critical role to play in ending homelessness. Our communities across the nation are experiencing a housing crisis, and we as case managers are helping people navigate those needs. The system is only as strong as each component, and we are here to learn how case managers can best serve their clients. Our goals for today are going to be to one, review the intersection of housing first and harm reduction techniques, specifically in case management for homeless service providers. We're going to identify and review some goal setting and housing stability, and we'll discuss empathy, fatigue, and burnout awareness and prevention. So we'll start with some principles of client-centered case manager, housing first and harm reduction. Housing First is an approach that's designed to prevent and end homelessness, and it uses data-driven methods to increase the long-term stability of the people that we're helping and to address those root causes of homelessness. And harm reduction, it's basically a set of practical strategies that are designed to reduce negative consequences of risky behavior, for example, substance abuse. So the core principles of housing first, homelessness is a housing problem. It's not a problem that's unique to any individual. It is a housing problem. Another principle is that housing is a basic human right that everyone is entitled to without having to justify their need for it. Another principle is that people who are experiencing homelessness should be put in permanent housing as soon as possible and then connected with the resources. So there shouldn't be any conditions to getting that safe and stable housing. Another principle is that underlying issues that may have contributed to someone experiencing homelessness are better addressed after that person is safely housed. And we also did a training specifically on housing first for the Heartland community, and that's going to be available to you all as well. So some of the characteristics of housing first services as it relates to case management is that there are few to no barriers. So we are not barring access or making it harder for people to get housing. We're not making things dependent on whether or not they're sober, have income, or they are demonstrating that they are committed to participating in these services. We're making sure that our accommodations are reasonable so that people can access services. So for example, if we're having a client come meet with us for case management and they have some barriers on mobility, we aren't going to make them walk up a flight of stairs to come get to their case management meeting, okay? If, there are, other issues that people may present with that make their ability to access our services non-existent, we want to make sure that we're giving them the accommodations for that. We also want to make sure that we're identifying alternatives, so connecting folks to resources to ensure that they have the access they need. And then one of the things that I really like to hone in on is that services are voluntary and client-driven. We are not forcing people to participate in services. We are not, as the case managers, dictating what services they need to take and writing their entire case plan ourselves based off what we think is best. We're making sure that clients are participating and clients are helping to lead their own service delivery and case management. We're also trying to avoid eviction and basically anything that's going to result in homelessness. So we're being proactive. We are making sure that where possible, we're transferring clients from one program to another if it's applicable. And we're just making sure that before someone is entering into a state of homelessness, if we can prevent it, we're preventing it. So who benefits from housing first? These answers are driven by data. We know this to be true. These are not like lofty things that someone is coming up with. We know that people with complex service needs benefit from housing first. So we're talking about our folks who have, all of the mental health diagnoses, all of the trauma, all of the substance abuse issues, people who have disabilities that significantly limit their income. We know they're not going to earn, a living wage. These are the people who benefit from housing first. These people are also often turned away from other affordable housing options because of some of their complex service needs. And these are also the people who are least likely to be able to be what we would consider to be proactive in seeking and obtaining housing on their own. So these aren't the folks that are going to get up and go find a market rate rental and be safe and secure in these housing. These are the people who, for whatever reason, cannot and have not been able to, and they are the perfect people to participate in housing first programs. All right, now we have a discussion for you. I'm going to open up a new screen share for you, and we are going to just do like a word huddle and talk about what case management means to you. So you should see it pop up on your screen. These are the instructions for accessing Mentimeter. If you are on your computer right now for the Zoom, the easiest way to do this is to take your phone and scan the QR code, or you can go to www.menti.com and enter the code 32290722. And you can actually keep this open once you log into Mentimeter because we're going to use this to lead a lot of our discussion questions. That way, you don't have to unmute and be recorded saying things that you don't want anybody to hear you say. You don't have to put anything in the chat. It is all totally anonymous, but it gives us an opportunity just to interact and discuss with one another. And I am going to move us along to the next slide. So in one word, describe what case management means to you. And as you do this, you're going to see everyone's responses pop up in real time. So you'll be able to see what everyone wrote in there. And you can give us, okay, some people are typing in responses. If you need the instructions again, I'll put that back up on the screen for anyone. And I'm also putting the link in the chat. And thank you all for adding, these words to our little word bubble. And the way this works is basically the larger words, the ones that you see displayed more prominently on the screen, that means that more than one person has entered that in there. So when you see things like assist, coordination, empowerment, that means that so many folks who are participating enter those words so that they're showing up larger. And I just wanted to see and get a feel for what case management means to each of us, because to some of us, it means something different. For example, to me, case management or a case manager is more like a coach or a guide, because that's what they have been in so many different ways for my life. And it's always interesting to see how we all think and feel about the work that we do. So you can keep entering your responses into the Mentimeter. Don't close your window, because we're going to go to another discussion question as we progress throughout this presentation. And you will see me just switch screens again. We are going to, as soon as the screen share loads again, we're going to jump into some core principles of harm reduction, because harm reduction plays a part in the way that we serve our clients as well. So some of the core principles of harm reduction are removing barriers, meaning that, again, access to programs and services isn't contingent on whether or not someone is participating or being compliant. Non-coercive engagement. So the client has the choice to manage or mitigate the risk of their own high-risk behaviors. So we are not telling people, if you don't stop this particular thing won't happen. We are letting people decide whether or not they want to stop that behavior. It's also client-driven services. So we're working together with the clients, again, to explore options, to set goals, and we want client feedback. That client feedback is going to inform the services, and at each step of the way, the client is in control. We also want to focus on the immediate needs. So we need to set goals or help our clients set goals that are realistic and attainable. We want to celebrate progress on the small goals as successes. We never want to ignore, even when something tiny happens, because for a lot of our clients, that something tiny and small is actually a really big deal. Information education. We want to provide information and education so that our clients can make informed decisions. We don't want to just tell people what to do. We want to let them come to those decisions on their own. And we also want to connect people to different resources. Again, as someone who has experienced homelessness for a really long time, that information and education piece is really critical to long-term housing stability, because when I'm no longer your client, I still have the tools that you taught me, right? I still know that when, for example, there is a program that will pay my utilities, and I know that in the winter month, that heat bill, the light and the gas, they're going to be high, and that's going to take away from my money. The way that I can prevent from a possible eviction and not having enough money to stretch when those utility bills are higher is getting connected to this utility discount program that my case manager told me about. I know that different programs exist. I know what information is needed to go get myself connected to those resources, and I can do it on my own if the need arises without having to come back to a case manager. We also want to focus on building relationships. We want to focus on developing strong, trusting relationships. And we want to hang in there with clients who may be resistant, because as we'll talk about a little later, there may be some reasons that clients just are hesitant to build that relationship with us. Another principle is personal responsibility. Again, we want to use natural consequences of behaviors as tools to move toward a desire for change. And community partnerships. We want to identify and develop partnerships and referral procedures for appropriate resources. So who benefits from harm reduction? Because it's so flexible, harm reduction strategies are appropriate for basically all the people experiencing homelessness. We're talking adults, adults with families, and then youth. Harm reduction is basically a service model for individuals who engage in high-risk behaviors, drug use, alcohol use, higher risk sexual activity, sex work. And I just want to give a disclaimer here. We know that sex work is a choice. We're not saying anything is wrong with it, but for some people, it could be considered a high risk behavior, depending on, the location that they're engaging in that type of work and the other needs of that particular individual. Why harm reduction? One, it is part of Housing First. It has documented positive client outcomes, and then there are a number of benefits to providers, specifically a reduction in the time that workers are spending, and then the money that we have to spend on different services that we're providing. And here's how it relates to Housing First. Housing First is a harm reduction strategy. Harm reduction is integral to the positive outcomes of Housing First programs, including residential stability. So making sure that people are staying housed once we get them to where they need to be. Social benefits, if we're eliminating what we consider high risk behaviors, there's also an added benefit to our greater society. And then again, it's cost effective, less time, less money. So let's talk about our intake, client-centered intake, and establishing trusting relationships. So intake sets the stage. This is, our first time interacting with our clients in a lot of situations. Those first impressions last. We want to be prepared. We want to consider our environment and our presentation. So is our space welcoming? Do we make it accessible? Are we making sure that people who have different cultural differences are still comfortable and feeling welcomed in that environment so that they want to come talk to us? We want to convey safety, understanding, empathy, genuine interest. We want to notice and acknowledge the strengths and the positives. It's just like that thing that we're taught when we're networking. If you can't think of anything else to say, you can compliment something, about the person you're sitting or standing across from. The same is true in case management. We want to pick up on those strengths and the positive things. And if we can't find anything, the fact that you're here today is awesome. I am so glad that you came to talk to me. Thank you for sharing this information. Those kind of words go a long way when we're trying to build trust. And another thing I like to point out also from the perspective of someone who has had to engage in case management as a client, it's hard. It's really hard to sit there and have to tell someone all the things that you've done wrong, and explain your life and all these very difficult situations that you may have experienced, especially when it's a stranger, but you have to do it to get the help that you need. So hearing those positive things and being in front of someone who's warm and welcoming, and it doesn't feel like they're just doing their job, it makes all the difference in the world. Another thing is to summarize the conversation, provide clear next steps and some follow-up actions, because we want folks to walk away from our meeting not feeling like it was a waste of time, right? We want to make sure that everything is clear so that there can be some follow-up. We want to make sure that there are at least a few, maybe one or two follow-up steps, even if they're small, so that when those steps are completed, we can again acknowledge that something positive has happened. And then again, it doesn't feel like a waste of time. We want people to feel like the time that they spent with us mattered and they got something accomplished. And now we'll talk about some client-focused intervention, engagement, and support tools, specifically trauma-informed care and motivational interviewing. So trauma-informed care is a structure or a treatment perspective that emphasizes understanding, compassion, and essentially responding to all the effects of trauma. I want to emphasize that trauma-informed care does not mean that we are sitting across from our clients as their case managers and doing any kind of psychoanalysis. We're not seeking to identify the causes of their trauma, and we're not seeking to heal anyone of their trauma. It is just an acknowledgement that trauma impacts people in different ways and may be present in the way that our clients interact with us. And one thing I also like to point out is that experiencing homelessness in and of itself is traumatic. Even if there was, nothing huge that stands out to us, the fact that someone doesn't have a safe and stable place to live is a traumatic experience. It disrupts our safety as human beings. And when we don't feel safe, we can't do a number of things. So lots of us can't think critically when we are unsafe because we are only thinking about the need to have that safe place to lay our heads at night. That's true for our clients. So by the time someone has come to you, they have already experienced the traumatic event, and we need to be aware that that trauma can present in many different ways. There are 6 key principles of trauma-informed care: safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration, empowerment, and then just some cultural, historical, and gender issues. We are not going to focus too much on peer support because this is a training for case managers. And then we're not going to also dive into the nuances of different cultural, historical, or gender issues. We're just going to acknowledge that they exist because we don't have the time or capacity to go into all of those different details today. That would be a completely different set of training materials. But we want to highlight again these principles because they influence the way that our clients interact with us. So safety is a critical human need for our clients in terms of their housing, and also for us. We want to feel safe when we're at work. It's difficult to work if we don't feel safe, and it's difficult for our clients to engage with us if they aren't feeling safe. Trustworthiness and transparency. So the decisions that are made, the way that we operate with our clients, the way that we're managing cases, the goal is always to build and maintain trust. And we can do that by being transparent. So we don't want to hide the ball. These are, that might look like we're talking to our clients and we're telling them why we're making a specific suggestion. For example, I am suggesting that you consider these substance use treatment programs because you said that this might be an issue for you. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm suggesting you do it because I think it might help in the long run. We can just be transparent about things. If someone is coming in with another example I can think of from my case manager days is my clients who just weren't going to earn enough to pay rent. No matter what they did, they weren't going to earn enough to pay rent unless they increased their skills or education. So that meant from my side of the table as the case manager, being honest and transparent with them. So that might look like we review some local ads for apartments, and I show them, this is how much it costs to rent an apartment. This is how much you bring in every month. I think that you will have a greater chance of success if you work on increasing your skills or your education so that you can then increase your income. That is why I'm suggesting school, or that is why I'm suggesting these job training programs. We're being transparent so that they can make the decision to do what they think is best for themselves. In terms of peer support, this principle is basically just about shared experiences being integrated into the organization, and that being part of the service delivery. So for case managers, that could look like taking feedback from previous clients. That might look like having your lived experience folks being engaged in the policies and procedures planning within your community. In terms of collaboration, we want to acknowledge the power differences between staff and clients. There is a power dynamic between case managers and the people who are being served. because the reality is that from our perspective as the person being served, as the client, the case manager holds the key. Case manager is the difference between you getting housed and not. The case manager is the difference between you being able to continue in this program and not. So there is a power dynamic. There is sometimes a desire to please, and the client may not want to ruffle any feathers because you are in a position of power over them. Excuse me. For empowerment and choice, we want to make sure that we're looking at the individual strengths and experiences of each client, and that we're validating those. That also goes into the trustworthiness. When we empower our clients and acknowledge their strengths, we are showing that we're someone who can be trusted with this very important information that they've shared with us. And then when we talk about historical, cultural, and gender issues, we're just acknowledging that there are biases. Some of them are going to be implicit. There are going to be some stereotypes, and there's also going to be some historical trauma for different people that we are interacting with. And that's going to be based on us. So our cultural, historical, and gender differences compared to our clients. And we've got to acknowledge that those exist in order to be able to truly help people. Right, now we will talk about implementing trauma-informed care. So again, with safety, that looks like clear and consistent boundaries. With trustworthiness, that means that services are predictable and reliable. They know they can depend on us. They know that when we say we're going to be somewhere, we're going to be there. That means that if they have some important deadline coming up, we're being proactive and letting them know, hey, it's December. I'm going to be out for a couple of weeks. Here's what you can do on your own while I'm gone, and here's what we can accomplish before I head out. Because one of the things that stood out to me as a provider and both a client is that it is hard to separate, the work from the personal, because we as case managers, I don't think any of us are in this work for the money. We do it because we care. We do it because we want to help people. And when you know that someone's actual life is dependent on whether or not you show up every day, it's hard to take that sick day when you really just want to rest. It's hard to take that vacation when you need it because you know that someone's depending on you. But you earn points, you earn trust points when you are able to communicate and be transparent with your client and make sure you let them know that this is my job. I'm not going to be here for a while, but I'm still here for you. And here's who you can contact while I'm out. Another thing is choice, right? We want to make sure that we're letting our clients decide what they want to work on first. We don't decide the priority for accomplishing different goals. Our clients decide that because it's their lives. And we need to trust that they're going to make the appropriate decision for themselves. And if they choose to prioritize things in a way that's different from what we would do, that's okay. There's going to be a natural consequence to choosing different things. And what's going to happen is that we're going to be there to help them should they fall and make a mistake. And we're going to support them through that. And the next time they're going to learn. But we don't need to make the decision for them. Collaboration ties into that client choice as well. We're doing things with our client and not for the client. So I know a lot of times we are, some of the day-to-day work, getting people connected to different services might involve us doing it, like actually writing the referral and sending it over. But there are things that our clients can help with. Maybe a case management meeting looks like we're going over the questions for this referral with them, or we're preparing them for this interview. We're doing mock interviews with them, but it's a collaborative effort. And so our clients are also participating in some of the work. They're carrying some of the workload. They're understanding what goes into getting them housed or getting whatever need met or accomplishing whatever goal. And again, it doesn't feel like a waste of time. This is one of the ways that we make sure our clients are engaged in services, and they're not just putting case management to the side, because if someone's doing everything for you and you're not giving anything to do, why show up, right? And then empowerment. Our client is the expert. They hold all the solutions because it's their lives. They know themselves better than us. They know what they are capable of. They know what their weaknesses are, but what they might need to know is their strengths. They need you, they need us to help them identify their strengths, remind them of all the positive things. And that is what helps them to build the skills to be able to go implement all these amazing things that you taught them and utilize all the resources. All right, we're gonna switch again. Bear with me, you all. I am one of the older millennials. So I'm the folks who grew up with the typewriter in the classroom, and I recently made the transition to switching between all the screens, just like I'm sure many of you have. And I can't go that fast. So our next Mentimeter question is going to be, what's the first question you usually ask to a client when they come in front of you? You should see the switch now. And if you still have your Mentimeter pulled up, that should be showing for you. There are the instructions again, if you need it. Right. So what's the first question you usually ask to a client experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity? Couple of minutes for some responses to come in there. If you want to drop this in the chat, you can do that as well. One of the questions that I always like to ask new clients was, when this is all over, what would your life look like? And of course, everyone would always say, I would have my own place, or, I would be in my own house, or I wouldn't have to deal with case managers, or, some people would be funny and sure they would have a ton of money and not a care in the world, right? And that for me is how we would lead our case management process. So that's your end goal. We're going to take whatever you said, and that is your end goal. If it's to have your own place and not have to deal with me or any other service providers, great. That's what I want for you too. We have that shared goal, and we're going to work together to accomplish that. I love that someone is starting with an introduction. All right, feel free to keep entering your responses. I think I see a couple being added to the chat too. Feel free to keep entering your responses, and we are going to pull this back up later. And I'm going to switch us back to our presentation. Does anyone want to come off mute and share why their first question is usually their first question? Totally okay if you don't. I'll share why my first question is my first question. I always pick that question, what does your life look like? If everything was perfect, there weren't any issues, because I've always found that to be easier to get a goal that's actually practical, something we can break down over an amount of time and work towards, than asking, what's your goal? Because the goal is to get housed, right? They wouldn't be here if that wasn't the goal. But sometimes that looks different to different people. And I always found that I got a more genuine response. And sometimes they would relax a little bit, and that might give me a way to secretly identify some things that are important to them without them having to tell me. A low pressure ask. Thank you all for participating and your patience. All right, that leads us to motivational interviewing techniques. Big goal with motivational interviewing is to facilitate change talk. Change talk is when the client says things that are in favor of change. And our goal as a case manager is to get them to that place in a way that's collaborative and not avoidant. We also want to help clients identify and resolve ambivalence so they can move forward, right? So, in basic terms, we want to make people talk in a way that gets them to their end goal. You know, in every aspect of our case management process, we should be using motivational interviewing techniques, meaning that we are talking to people in a way that affects change. We are not focused on all the bad things that happened. We're going to acknowledge them. They exist. They happened. I am sorry. What did you learn from that? And how can we use that as a strength to propel you forward? Some motivational interviewing techniques so that we can make this practical. I want you all to be able to walk out of here today and be able to use these things. And most of you probably already are. We're asking open-ended questions. So we're exploring things with our clients, the who, what, when, where, the how. We want to get as many words as possible while we're also actively listening, taking notes so that we can pull what we need to pull. Affirmations, we are acknowledging, affirming, recognizing strengths. And these need to be genuine and meaningful. We're not just saying things to say them because we're trying to check our box. We're actually recognizing things that they do well. And that might mean, you know, opening our boxes, our minds a little bit more, and just pulling things. Reflections. We want to make sure that we are making statements that show we're being empathetic and that we understand. We do not want to say, for example, things like, I understand how that feels, because the reality is if you have not been homeless, you don't understand how it feels. And that can be insulting. It can feel kind of like you're minimizing the experience, because homelessness is a very real and scary place to be. And it is never fun to hear that someone who hasn't been there understands, because again, they don't and they can't. But we can convey that we might understand the feelings that come along with that without saying literally, I understand. It could be something as simple as, you know, the way we're looking, showing that we're engaged, the head nods, the casual cues of conversation that we might have with friends and family. We want to use some of those with our clients, because again, remember that these are still very intimate conversations. We're having people share some of the most difficult parts of their lives with us, and we're not a part of their family. You know, we're not close friends. And so we want to make sure that we're conveying that we're here, we're with them, and that we understand. We also want to summarize things. We're going to use summaries to transition to different topics. For example, let me make sure I heard you correctly. You said, and then we enter, you know, what they said. So where does that put you now? Another one that I like is, I hear this, right? So what's next? You know, we're just having that casual conversation, and that makes it feel easier. You know, it takes some of the weight off. And what it does is allows the space for the client to really just talk and share and communicate their needs, their wants, their desires, all the things that are going to help us as case managers, you know, work our magic and put different things together to help move people along. We also want to practice active and empathetic listening skills. So we want to prepare to listen by being relaxed, open, again, leaning forward, making eye contact, and making sure that we're facing the person who's speaking. Just a note about eye contact. We know that, again, for some of our clients, they are going to be coming to us with different types of trauma, different type of experiences. That's where we use our skills and expertise to kind of gauge whether or not someone wants eye contact. If someone looks uncomfortable with making eye contact, it's not unreasonable to ask. I notice you shifting a little bit. Is it easier for you, or are you more comfortable if we're not looking in one another's eyes? And someone may answer that for you. If not, you know, you can use your judgment and not look them square in the eye. We just want to show that we are listening and prepared to listen to them, but we also want to be conscious, again, of different needs and different abilities. So for active listening, again, we're paying attention to our body language. We want to be encouraging. We want to paraphrase what people are saying. We want to clarify if we don't understand. We're reflecting using open-ended questions and again, summarizing. Empathetic listening means that essentially empathy is the intimate comprehension of another person's thoughts and feelings without adding your own judgment and expectation. So that's what I was mentioning earlier. It is saying you understand without saying the words I understand. It's communicating that you understand without adding your thoughts about it. So we might not add in for example, maybe someone tells us that they ended up in whatever situation that has brought them to homelessness because of some bad money decision they made. We are not saying that was a bad money management decision out loud. We're keeping that part to ourselves. And we are just communicating that we have the ability to understand how difficult it could be. And you all let me know if anything is unclear or if you have any questions along the way. You can, do the raise hand feature in your Zoom box down there. We also want to assess our client's strengths and needs. So assessment is an ongoing process. It never ends. We are always thinking about what comes next, what our clients may need. Assessment helps us to identify goals, strengths, and challenges, especially in situations where our clients might not be able to identify them on their own. Assessment guides prioritization, service planning. Assessment also identifies immediate and long-term needs, and it might require some discernment about what to focus on and when. But again, that does not mean we are making the decision for clients. We are wanting clients to make the decisions about what to focus on in their case plans and when to do it. We are just there to guide and help pick up the pieces should they fall. When we talk about prioritizing client needs, we always want to do those emergency, immediate safety concerns first, and then urgent, immediate needs. So basic needs that require care and attention. Semi-urgent and immediate needs, they require attention, but they're not immediate or urgent. And then non-urgent or chronic takes us back to risky behaviors or chronic conditions that might need to be addressed. So the way that I always think about this is the different stages that our clients come to us in. For example, when someone comes to an emergency shelter, they might need, some medical care. They might be out of medication for some chronic condition. I'm thinking, for example, a client with diabetes and their feet and ankles are swollen and they're not eating the right foods, they're not exercising, all of these things that would help mitigate some of the symptoms of their health condition, they need to take care of. But that's not the emergency immediate need. The immediate need is safety. They need somewhere to live. They can't focus on their health if they don't have a bed to sleep in. So we want to get them housed. They're in the shelter. We've got that part down and we're going to work towards more permanent housing. An urgent need is something that a basic need that's going to require care and attention. It may be that they have, some sores on their feet and their ankles. We're going to get them connected to healthcare so that they can get their medication and get that taken care of. Semi-urgent, immediate, it requires attention, but it's not as immediate as that health condition. Maybe they don't have all the proper identification that they're going to need when we start referring them to services. They need ID, they need birth certificate, they need all of those kind of things. It's immediate because they can't do anything without it, but it's not as urgent as that healthcare need. And then the non-urgent or chronic needs, we can use the example of not exercising or not, eating in a diet that's going to be helpful for their medical condition. That is definitely something that needs to be addressed, but it doesn't take precedent over these other three needs that we identified. That's something that we're going to work towards, but we're going to address these more emergent needs first. When we talk about creating goals and an action plan, we are starting with the assessment. We're assessing strengths and resources, then we're identifying needs. we're sorting needs by urgency, and then we're setting goals and creating the action plan to meet the goals. And again, these are all things that we are doing with our clients. Hopefully our client is able to identify some needs. If not, maybe we're helping identify one and then they're identifying the rest, but we're not going to try to do this all for them. Then we want to set concrete goals. It's easier to tell when a concrete goal has been accomplished because that goal is concrete. And to make our goals more concrete, we can try to add numbers, places, people, dates. I feel like these are things you all know, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But for example, a goal that might, or some examples of goals that might be too abstract are trying to live healthier, looking for work, being nicer to a roommate. A more concrete goal, visiting your doctor in July for a checkup. Instead of looking for work, it's send your resume out. Instead of wording it, be nicer to your roommate, it's going to be the actual things you can do to demonstrate that you're being nicer to your roommate. I'm going to pause. I see a couple items in the chat. I think the first couple are answering the question of what case management means. And then the other are some answers to our second discussion question. We also want to make sure that goals are smaller because a small goal is more likely to be accomplished. And that does a couple of things. It one gives our client the motivation to keep working. And it also helps us do something, set a goal that can be accomplished quickly. So for example, the end goal might be to finish a college degree. But there are some steps before that that we can turn into goals so that we're checking things off the box and helping to, again, add additional strengths. So we can say, you accomplished these goals. You know, if you accomplished 4 goals this month, we are also making sure that things are more attainable because sometimes that big goal is just too big. It's too lofty. We need to see the steps to get there. So instead of finish a college degree, the goal might be register for classes. Instead of get custody of a child, the first goal might be call the social worker to check in. Right? And instead of start a business, the goal might be to bake the first cake. So some of the top reasons that we know clients disengage or are pushed away from services, the first one is that the services don't meet the client's most pressing needs. We see this kind of situation occur when the client is not involved in identifying their needs and setting their goals. The client should feel like the services they're receiving are taking care of their most immediate needs. The way that we do that is we make sure that they're involved. Engagement is not perceived as the best use of limited resources. So that is an example of this, is when clients feel like we're essentially wasting their time. Showing up to a meeting and we're just asking them a few questions and they might feel like they're checking a box by answering the questions. But when we actually do something that feels like it's a more productive use of time, maybe we're looking at job listings with them, or we look at apartment listings with them, or we prepare for an interview with them, that might be perceived as a better use of time. Another reason is fear of negative consequences to engagement. So an example of this is sometimes you show up and you tell things, and those things that you tell get you in trouble, right? Or you share information, and because of judgment or implicit biases, that information that you shared has prevented you as a client from receiving, a different quality of services. We want to make sure that people don't feel like they're being punished for participating. Another reason is the expected frequency of engagement doesn't align with the need. So a client that's doing all the things and doesn't need as much of a hands-on approach may feel like they want to pull away if they're being essentially micromanaged. Just like us, if we're at work, if we got a supervisor who's checking in every 5 minutes and we're not being trusted to do the things that we say we're going to do and perform our job functions, it's a little harder to do that job. The same is true for our clients. And then another reason, of course, is lack of capacity to engage. For any number of reasons, our clients just may not be able to engage the way we want them to. And trauma-informed care can reduce a lot of these barriers. The way we maintain engagement through trauma-informed care. Again, these are our principles of trauma-informed care. Again, the safety, trustworthiness, all of those in the red are our principles. And then on the other side, in like the light pink, those are just some ways we can maintain engagement using trauma-informed care. So for example, with safety, the case manager can demonstrate that engagement will feel safe. We can do that by making sure that there's a plan in place for what to do if the client doesn't know how to follow up. For trustworthiness, we're going to build rapport through following through with them and being transparent. For choice, again, case management is fully guided through client choice. So an example of that might be the service and the schedule and the location is flexible to meet the client's needs. Collaboration, the case manager is an active participant, literally meeting the client where they are. So we are both client and case manager are taking ownership over different action steps. And that could be as simple as making a list. Case manager is going to do A, B, and C. Client is going to do 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to come together on this date and this time and talk about our progress. All right. Empowerment. We as case managers are building client capacity to meet their own needs. And that again encourages and builds their capacity for self-advocacy. And if there are any questions as we go, feel free to drop them in the chat, you all. So trauma-informed termination. At some point, our case management with our clients is going to come to an end. The way we end that relationship using trauma-informed care, we have some examples here. For safety, we're going to monitor the emotional reaction of the client. For trustworthiness, some examples are we're going to explain what happens to terminate services up front. And then we routinely visit that timeline so that if this is a natural end because their time in our program has ended, it's just a natural transition. We're going to routinely visit that timeline throughout our case management relationship with them. Choice. Ideally, the client is going to choose when to terminate assistance. We know sometimes that doesn't happen. So what we can also do, one of the things I like to do is whenever we start a new service, we're going to talk about what can you find somewhere else. So for example, if one of the goals that we have in a client service plan is budgeting, and I, as a case manager, I'm helping them budget. When we get to a certain point, we're going to talk about some tools that they can use to maintain their budget on their own. Maybe there's an app that they use. Maybe there are some resources that we give them that they use. Maybe their bank has something that they can use to maintain their budget and monitor and track their spending. But we're always talking about what services they want to continue and where they can get those services from other places outside of us as their case managers. And again, collaboration. Everybody is preparing for termination. We start day one preparing for termination, and termination isn't always a bad thing. It's a lot of times a good thing because that means they don't need us anymore. So we're identifying appropriate referrals, we're creating an exit plan, and we're just constantly preparing. And then empowerment. We're going to be reviewing successes and challenges, and we're making sure that our client is prepared with a plan and the resources for if problems come up again. Right, now we have another question for you. And this one is just a little scale. How comfortable are you with addressing conflicts when they arise? You can go into Mentimeter again, and you can just participate in this scale. And you should be able to enter your results. I'm not going to change the screen share again. See some responses coming in. And move us through the next slide. So you should be able to see everyone's responses populate as they come in. Now we're going to focus on conflict transformation. So to focus on conflict transformation, we want to have an understanding of anger management and conflict resolution. So BEARS is a common acronym for when anger comes up and conflict comes up in conversation. Breathe, empathize, ask, rephrase, and summarize. And we want to encourage I statements. And when I'm talking about conflict resolution and anger management, this is when we're interacting with clients and they say things to push our buttons, right? Because we know that this happens. And this also happens for our clients. So this could be something that we teach them. You know, when I get on your nerves as your case manager, I want you to do BEARS. And this is something that we could have on posters around our rooms. This is something that we could have printed on maybe a case form. If we're meeting electronically, we could just have this as our screen share whenever we're meeting with clients as a reminder. It can be the intro when we're starting conversations. But we want to make sure that we're practicing and our clients are practicing. And again, in a spirit of being transparent with our clients, we're letting them know we're doing this because we are both human. And just because of the nature of the work that we're doing together, we might rub each other the wrong way from time to time. So a conflict resolution approach for us as case managers, we want to remember that homelessness is a crisis, and crisis and conflict impede the ability to think clearly through problems. Sometimes it impedes the ability to be hopeful and to self-advocate. So some things that we can do to help minimize these issues and be proactive is to create a relaxing and positive environment for the conversation. That means that there's a level of privacy. As much as we can, it's quiet and there aren't interruptions. We can prevent it. There's not a computer or a desk between us and our clients. So maybe that means our computers or our chairs are to the side so that they can see us clearly, and we've got that line of sight there so we can have that human interaction. Again, we want to listen and validate their experiences without adding our own judgment. We want to help our clients articulate their needs and their words without making assumptions. And we also want to help them identify strengths, successes, and resources they've used in the past. This is something that we want to do throughout. We also want to help our client identify which of those strengths, successes, and resources could help them in this situation. And when these are the two that I think stand out to me the most, because those strengths and the resources and the way that clients navigate systems can go a long way. One of the things that I used to point out to some of my clients who had experience being in foster care for a long time, and then they were homeless, and then they had babies and homeless. One of the things I used to always point out for those folks is that you've already dealt with a system, right? Or if you've been in foster care, you know on some level what it feels like to not have one of your needs met. You know what it feels like to miss somebody, or you know what it feels like to be alone. You know what it feels like not to have a parent who is advocating for you or by your side. Whatever the situation may be that's unique to that individual, we're pulling that out as a strength. You know, I know that you can deal with this situation because you dealt with that. You know, tell me something that you did to, you know, help you get through that situation. But let's think about that and apply it here. You know, everything can be used as a strength. Everything can be used as a success. The fact that they are here now, you know, despite all the other things that happen, is always going to be a strength that we can default to when we can't pull anything else in the moment. Another conflict resolution technique is to help the client set short and long-term goals. We want, again, those quick goals that can be accomplished in a short amount of time so that people feel like they're doing something and they're seeing some changes. And then we also have long-term goals to make a more lasting impact. And we also want to build in flexibility to respond to progress and changes. Now we are going to talk about housing support and stability. I know we've covered a lot in a short amount of time. Do folks need a quick break? You can, let's see, type break in the chat if you want a break, and we'll do a quick break. or we can push forward if everybody wants to push forward. All right, we will keep going and we will plan to take a 5-minute break at the top of the hour. Thanks, you all. So defining the goal of housing stability. So housing stability is the resolution to homelessness, basically by obtaining permanent housing. It looks like our client having the resources and the capacity to afford and pay rent on time, however that's relevant for that client. So that might look like, for example, subsidized housing or a housing choice voucher program participant, or maybe it's permanent supportive housing, whatever it is, it's their ability to afford and pay rent on time, to follow the terms of their lease, and to meet other obligations to maintain permanent housing for the foreseeable future. We want to start by assessing the housing strengths and barriers. So we're going to look at their housing history and their income. So for housing history, what at your last place, worked well? What about that situation made it work well? Have you had a lease in your name before? Tell me what that was like. Do you have a history of evictions? Have you lived in subsidized housing? Has the client tried applying for a new lease recently? If they have, what were the outcomes? And does the client have any concerns about moving into their own place? So those housing history questions give you an idea of the strengths and the barriers just from getting those answers alone, right? And then with income, we want to know if our client is currently working or able to work. What are their current sources of income? Have they worked before? What did they look like? Another question that I always like to ask is, what's the amount of money that you feel like you would need to earn to be able to maintain housing on your own? And for me as a case manager, that gives me an idea of what the client knows and understands about the housing market in our area. Do they know and understand the cost of living, and whether or not they have been able to, or they can at this time, maintain or keep up with the cost of living with wherever we are in the country. I like to use that when a client couldn't really give answers to the housing history questions, but having an understanding of what they know now was always helpful. Client preference, we want to know what type of housing arrangement they want now or in the future. Do they want to live with a roommate? Do they prefer a house compared to an apartment, and why? Is there anything they need to avoid? And this is where issues like domestic violence situations might come around. Maybe they need to live in an area away from where that abuser lives or frequents, so that they aren't found in a situation where they're not going to be safe again. We want to know if there's an issue of substance use or recovery. We want to talk about their network. Do they feel safe? And would they consider shared housing, meaning living with a roommate? We also want to talk about strengths and barriers. When have they helped or supported others? What supports do they think they're going to need? How can actions or circumstances that led to this experience with homelessness be resolved or mitigated? We want to talk about how they solve problems. How do they access services? Do they do it on their own? Do they usually get support? Who are possible support persons? Another thing that I think about with the barriers exploration is whether or not there are things that are going to prevent them from living in certain places. The most prominent example I can think of is the sex offender registry, right? There are some of our clients who are on the registry at different levels, and because of that, they can't live in different areas. That's something that we need to know, so that we can problem solve and make sure that we're still getting them housing, but are aware of the barriers that are going to come up. And we want to know them sooner rather than later. So these are just some of the barriers to housing that are probably really familiar to most of us who do this work. If you have some additional ones that you don't see here, feel free to drop them in the chat. Some of the solutions to the common housing barriers. So for example, on the left, we have the barriers, and on the right, we have the resources or the resolution. So for example, in a dispute with a landlord, the resource might be mediation or conflict resolution with the landlord or the relative or friend that the client is living with. If there are, if there's a pending or previous evictions, maybe we're connecting them with legal services. If it's criminal legal history, maybe we are helping them find placements that aren't going to look too closely at that criminal history. Or if it's possible, we're connecting them with someone who can help with the expungement process to get some of that history cleared away. If it's financial history, which we know for a lot of our clients, there is some debt, there are some negative credit reports. That's just what happens when you're poor, right? We want to get those credit reports, identify ways to clear the debt, communicate the situation to landlords, and help our clients be able to do that for the future too. So maybe that looks like we make them a list a few months before you're ready to look for a new apartment. Let's get your credit report. Let's go ahead and send those letters. Let's make sure we're aware of all of our bills as they're coming up so that we aren't getting those negative reports made. If it's something that was in the past, but it's still there, let's help them prepare to have a conversation with the potential landlord so that we can maybe mitigate some of the reasonable hesitation the landlords might have to renting to our clients because of that financial history. Another barriers might be short-term financial crisis. And we're talking about, healthcare costs, auto maintenance, just the inability to afford the move-in costs, like that security deposit, first month's rent, all of that stuff. We want to look at one-time financial assistance or connecting them to mainstream resources or benefits. And I'm sure that you all have a ton of resources that are unique to your community and the folks that you work with. Sometimes it's helpful to just have these, example barriers that you see and some of the resources available kind of written out like this so that your clients can see them and they can maybe look and say, hey, I have this one, I have this one. Oh, here's, a solution to this, or have we considered this? It's just another way to help folks remain engaged in the process of managing their own cases. So after we've done our assessment, we want to make a housing stability plan. So we're, again, identifying barriers to housing and steps to mitigate or resolve them. We are identifying client strength and needs and the steps needed to build upon those strengths. And we're identifying available resources and a path to obtain those resources. What we're going to include in our plan is documenting all the steps, again, that the client and the case manager are going to take. We're including short-term and long-term goals with their actual timelines, and we're building in some flexibility to respond to progress and changing circumstances. Some key activities to ensure long-term housing stability: providing tenant education and supports to make sure that our people aren't getting evicted because of these violations, right? We want to make sure they aren't having noise complaints, they're not bringing in pets when they're not supposed to bring in pets. We know that maintaining a lease is much more than just paying rent on time, especially for our folks who haven't had to maintain a lease on their own. We want to make sure that they're ready, and we also want to make sure that they know about their rights as tenants. So we don't want our folks paying, rent to bad landlords. We want to make sure they know how to go get help when the landlord isn't upholding their end of the bargain. We want to make sure that our clients are able to maximize or increase their income when appropriate, budget and reduce expenses, and then help our clients build their support network. Some of the barriers to employment and mainstream benefits. We want to make sure that our clients know how to complete different forms, write a resume. We know now, as we're approaching 2024, a lot of job applications are online. That might look like we're making sure that our clients know where they can go to get that good, stable, Wi-Fi or internet use. Are there libraries that don't have strict time restrictions on using the computer because maybe it takes them 2 hours to fill out their job applications and the library only gives them an hour at a time, and if they don't finish it once, they don't get to submit it. They have to start all over the next time. Maybe our case management meeting looks like we're talking to our clients about how to talk to the folks at the library to make sure they get the time that they need. Or maybe it's walking them through how to navigate those online job application portals, right? We're helping clients prep and practice for appointments and interviews. how to, notify a potential employer if something comes up and you need to reschedule so that they don't just miss the interview altogether. How they should dress, what they should wear, how they should present themselves. We want to make sure we help them gather all the necessary documentation that they're going to need if they get hired for that job. Right. We want to connect them with the support or resources like job or life skills training, credit counseling, translation services, whatever it is that they need to go on and get employment that is going to give them a livable wage so that they can maintain that housing without us being involved. That's what we want to do. If it's a situation where our client needs a representative payee for their benefits, we want to make sure that we're helping them get connected to appropriate resources to set that up. And we want to follow up with them to make sure that they're maintaining employment and that they're maximizing their benefits. One of the things that I used to notice with my clients, something that I have for myself too, my very first job, like real job with good benefits, I had no idea, what to do. I think I missed out on like a year of retirement benefits because I didn't know that they meant anything. I just knew that it was money out of my paycheck every month. I didn't take advantage of a healthcare savings account because I didn't know what that was. I just knew that it took money out of my check. I didn't know that that was a benefit in terms of helping me stretch my budget until somebody told me. And a lot of times our clients don't know that information either. And we want to make sure that we have it, that they have it. We want to make sure that they're getting help with picking benefits if they get that. I don't know about you all, but I hate open enrollment season because it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of figuring out what to select. It's a lot of planning for the future. And it's really hard to plan for the future when your immediate needs aren't met. Right? So it's really hard to talk about the extended benefits of participating in these different things that come with your great new job if you are only focused on getting that first paycheck so that you can get somewhere safe to live. We want to make sure that they're not losing out on opportunities that are going to help them maintain that employment and maintain that housing moving forward. So just a few tips for mainstream and community resources referral. We want to develop a list of different resources for different household types. So maybe we have, one for different populations. Maybe we've got one for youth ages 18 to 25. Maybe we've got one for folks who are part of the LGBTIQ community so that they can get whatever specific resources they need. Maybe we've got one just for families, one that's separate for survivors of domestic violence, one for people who are coming from human trafficking situations. Whatever those different household types and different subgroups are, we're making sure that we have resources for people so that they're able to access them on their own. We also want to make sure that different subpopulations are connected to all their relevant benefits. So I'm thinking veterans, senior citizens, people with different types of disabilities or abilities. We want to make sure that they're connected to the benefit systems that are applicable to their situations. And a way that we can do that is maybe on our resource list that's agency-wide or community-wide. It's readable for a person who is not working as a case manager. So maybe it says something like, if you receive SSDI benefits, and maybe in parentheses, we have disability or different things like that. Whatever people in the community call a thing, we want to make sure that we're using the same word. So for example, SNAP. Some people still call SNAP food stamps because that's what it used to be called. So maybe when we write SNAP benefits, we put in parentheses food stamps. If you need help buying food, we're making sure that people can identify that this particular resource is going to meet their need because we're speaking the way that they speak and the way that they talk about things and using the words that they use to refer to different things, not our like agency or industry specific language. We want to build relationships with benefits offices, share success stories, all of those kind of things. Again, we are in the helping profession, and so are the people that we're referring our clients to. They want to know that the work they did helped somebody, and it's always nice to hear those stories. I know that it made me want to, or it helped me when I was tired and exhausted to get up and go back to work and give each client, that same high level of care and service. It helps to share those stories. We also want to invite workers from different organizations and different programs to hold on-site meetings. Maybe there are monthly enrollment nights, drop-in hours, things where people can just come get their questions answered. One thing that's typically helpful is having something after hours, on a Saturday during the day or on an evening after work. Well, that we create the opportunity for people who are also at work during the day, who can't take time off, who, don't have leave to come and get access to these resources, or at least find out where things exist. I know something that's common in the area where I live around the holidays is there will be, the food handouts. You come and you get the code or the food or whatever the thing is that addresses your immediate need. And we've also got all these people here to talk about accessing these services. Let me enroll you in this. Let me give you information for this. Or to register to come get this bag of groceries, you give your email address, and then we're going to add you to this email list. And we're going to email folks all these resources in the community periodically so that they exist. And what that does is, again, it helps people know that there is a service or resources to meet their need if and when that need arises, and they can get it without you. And then just in terms of our community, we want to think about all the different players, right? So there's childcare, food pantries, the after school and summer program for the kids, all of these different programs and agencies, they are the resources for our clients. And we want to make sure they know how to connect with and access them. So again, they can get the services they need to support long-term housing stability without us being a factor. So there are some common challenges to housing stability planning. And the way we kind of overcome them is we can talk about clarity of roles. Again, who's doing what? What's the case manager role and responsibility? What's the client role and responsibility? Again, shared resources, having something community or agency-wide that clients can access, that case managers can access, that tell us what's available to help in different situations. Focusing on connections to resources, and then focusing on housing as the top priority. It is always housing. We always want to make sure that people are housed safely and securely before we start talking about other needs. We also want to make time to track and analyze outcomes. We want to make sure that case managers are not so overworked and their schedules are so full with meeting with clients and trying to take care of their tasks that they don't have time to sit down and analyze what's actually happening. We want to be able to see what our work is doing. We want to be able to enter our data into whatever tracker that our agency uses. If we're inputting things in HMIS, we want to have time to input things into HMIS. We don't want case managers to have to do that when they're off work or on a weekend when they have their time. One way that we as case managers can do this, it's a little trick I've been using in the era of back-to-back Zoom meetings, is instead of meeting for an hour, we meet for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And then that gives me the time afterwards to enter whatever data. Maybe it means I'm making some reflection notes. As a case manager, it was always the case management notes that caught up with me at the end of the week. So factoring in the time to do my own data input and thinking about what I need to do next often was really helpful in terms of just tracking and analyzing the outcomes for clients. And then don't forget to celebrate successes. That goes for their clients, but also for you as the case manager. What's something that you did well? Maybe you mitigated some damage that was about to happen because you successfully resolved a conflict with your client. The conversation you had was the difference in your client terminating from services and not. You got somebody housed, somebody got a job, somebody enrolled in a job training program, somebody thanked you today, right? These are all ways to celebrate our own successes as case managers too. Right, and now we have another set of discussion questions. They are on your Mentimeter. What challenges do you often face with clients? What are some barriers to overcoming these challenges? What strengths have clients or participants used to overcome challenges? And what continues to be a challenge, and what solutions have you found? So each of these questions is going to be on a different slide, and you can go to them in Mentimeter on your own. one of the things that, one of the reasons that we have these questions set up, you're gonna have these, your community, Heartland is gonna have these when the training is over, all the responses would be there. They're anonymous, don't worry. But all the responses are there. And what this series of questions does is it helps the people who may be the manager or the supervisor for case managers, some of the agency directors. It's going to give them an example of some of the things that you're struggling with as a case manager, some of the barriers that you have, and it allows folks to plan and prepare for additional trainings or to maybe improve your work environment, things that can be done at the program level to improve it for you as a case manager and for your clients. So I really want to encourage you to go through each of these 4 slides to answer these questions, and they'll be there so folks can see them. Again, they are anonymous. Your names will not be on them. There is no way to track them to you. We're not recording IP addresses, email addresses, or anything. It's just your answers to the questions, so that the powers that be can get an idea of what the challenges and barriers are for the case managers. And then you can see them as you enter your responses too. I'm going to give a few minutes to respond to those questions, and then we will jump into recognizing and coping with and preventing empathy, fatigue, and burnout. So after we finish the questions, we'll take a 5-minute break. And thank you all again for participating so thoughtfully. You can, it is just 55 minutes past right now. We will come back right at the top of the hour. You can continue to answer the questions if you haven't finished, and then we will start right back up at 11 a.m. Central Time. Thank you all again for participating in the discussion questions. They are still up. You can enter your responses now, you can enter them later, but they are still there for you. Right now, we'll talk about how to recognize, cope with, and prevent empathy, fatigue, and burnout. So empathy is a mental construct. It allows us to basically resonate with other people's feelings, both positive and negative. So when we are practicing empathy, we feel with others and we kind of feel the feelings of another person. Then our internal experiences either become like empathetic distress, which is feeling it too much, and then compassion and empathetic concern. And we'll talk about that a little bit in detail later on in the presentation. So empathetic distress is the strong, aversive, and self-oriented response to the suffering of others, plus the desire to get out of that situation to protect yourself from your own feelings. And empathy fatigue is basically a chronic state of empathetic distress. And this is what leads to burnout. So an example of this is you feel so horrible about the things that your clients are experiencing because some of them are horrible things and they elicit horrible feelings. And then because of that, you want to push back and separate and really create that strong line and that wall to protect yourself. And that takes a lot of work, a lot of mental work, and a lot of actual physical exhaustion can occur. And that is when case managers or people in helping professions in general burn out. Burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion that's brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. And that can be the stress from other people. So it's called when people feel a lack of control over or a capacity to cope with the stressors of their environment. And that can be any stressors, not just empathetic distress. In relation to the empathetic distress we might experience as case managers, that can arise when there aren't personal or organizational structures and tools in place to help staff cope with the stress that they feel from working with clients and the trauma that clients share with us. Now, a lot of times, just as a case manager, I'm going to go ahead and say it's not usually us. It's usually the environments that we work in, right? Our caseloads are too large, or our programs are understaffed, or we don't have enough training to really be able to effectively serve some of our clients, but we want to because we want to help them. And that is exhausting, trying to figure out all those things, trying to create skills that we don't have without the support of our organizations. That can be hard, and that can result in burnout. Here is kind of the process of how you go from empathy to burnout. Empathy, you start off feeling with others, identifying their suffering, their pain, whatever their negative emotions are. And then you start to experience the empathetic distress, meaning wanting to get away, not wanting to feel all the things. And then that leads to the empathy fatigue. You're feeling those awful feelings and that desire to get away all the time. Every time you come into work, every time you log into your computer, you don't want to write your notes. You don't want to show up. You don't want to be in these meetings. And then you got the burnout. You are tired when you wake up in the morning. You are tired of sitting in the staff meeting. You are tired of the client who is getting on your last nerves because they are just responding to their own trauma, but you're already tired, so you can't deal with it. The example that I think about now as a parent is when my daughter was 2, and everything was a no, and I don't want to. And we were peak COVID, like the very beginning of the shutdowns, and we were potty training, and I was in court online all day, and my child was throwing poop around the house, y'all. I was burnt out of parenting. And that's kind of the same feeling that we can get when we are doing this kind of work, when we're dealing with these very big feelings and very real situations of people being in distress. And again, we care about our clients. So it's not something that you should feel bad about if you feel burned out. There are ways to prevent it, but it's not just on you as the case manager to prevent these feelings too. Your organization should be doing some things for you to help manage some of that. So if you are feeling burned out, do not feel bad about feeling burned out. All right, empathy fatigue, what it looks like. It can look like a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. For many people, it can look like psychological distress, cognitive shifts, meaning the way you think and experience the world, disturbance in relationships, and changes to a frame of reference. For psychological distress, it might be emotional. So you're anxious about going to work, you're dreading going to work. It can be grief, just feeling sad. And some people also feel enraged, they get angry. It can be intrusive imagery of a client's trauma. So seeing that client sitting in front of you crying about whatever it was over and over again. It can result in you in avoiding engaging in work around clients' trauma. So maybe it looks like you just don't want to talk about the situation in case management anymore, which means you don't want to think about it anymore. You're not identifying resources anymore. For some people, it's an inability to sleep. They have stomach issues, decreased engagement in supervision and self-care activities, and also addictive behaviors. I know when I was fresh out of grad school as a new social worker, my friends and I, we were all case managers, and we went to happy hour every single day of the week. Was that necessarily bad? No, but it was something that became an addictive behavior for a lot of us. We needed to go to that happy hour. We needed to have that glass of wine. We needed to engage in that behavior in order to be able to decompress from the day that we had during the work that we did. Cognitive shifts that could look like increased suspicion of others, cynicism, blaming the victim or feeling victimized by our clients, and just an extreme sense of being vulnerable or helpless. So, for example, I think we see this a lot in like the brand new case manager and then the case manager who's been doing it for several years. You know, the brand new case manager, they are going to save the world. They are energetic. They've got all the resources. And then those of us have been doing this for a while. We're just like, yep, that's how the system works. That's not going to go anywhere. We just give them the resources and they're not going to use it. That's where we start to see the cognitive shift. It is typically a result and a response to burnout, not a lack of ability or caring. And it doesn't indicate a bad case manager. It indicates a tired case manager. Disturbance in relationships. So decreased trust in personal or professional relationships, distancing from clients through judgment or pathologizing clients, over identifying with clients or becoming overly responsive or feeling paralyzed in the face of clients' challenges. Sometimes we see this as an example of a case manager who, is buying things with their own money because their clients need them. Right. And they're just so done with trying to get resources that they can't find. They're just going to get those resources on their own and make sure all their clients are okay. This is the person who's really taking that work home with them and they can't find their cutoff line anymore. Right. Changes to frame of reference. So a disconnection from your own identity, a change in your fundamental beliefs, a loss of previously held faith or sense of spirituality, a distortion of value, right? And just general loneliness, feeling like nobody understands, nobody gets it. You're the only person in the world who understands, how these things work. These are all examples of empathy fatigue. And what does burnout look like? So remember, burnout is a symptom of empathy fatigue, and it can look like a number of these. What I would encourage you to do is think about whether or not you are starting to see some empathy fatigue in yourself. Think about whether or not you can identify some colleagues who may exhibit some of these burnout symptoms. And you don't need to do anything with it. Just think about whether or not you've seen it and how often you see it. So for some people, it can look like cynicism, frustration, depression, feeling like a failure, nothing you do matters, hopelessness and helplessness, exhaustion and overwhelmed, right? There's a lot going on there, and these are real feelings. These are real symptoms that you as a provider are feeling, that your organization should be aware of. But we want to make sure that as case managers, we can also recognize these symptoms in ourselves, because we can reverse and prevent burnout, right? It's something that happens, it's something we need to be aware of, but it's not something that is inevitable, and it's not something that you can't recover from. So interventions to address burnout and helping professions usually focus on stress management and other self-care strategies. But in real life, these methods, there's not really a lot of evidence of them actually working against fatigue and burnout. Self-care is great. We are definitely advocates for self-care, but we also know that there's a lot of research that's demonstrated that compassion is a skill that can be cultivated, and that empathetic distress can be reversed by learning how to turn empathy into compassion. So the short story is that empathy distress, it impacts our emotional system, our body's natural response to stress and trauma. Compassion does not. We can be compassionate for our clients and still demonstrate that we are empathetic without taking all of that on into our bodies ourselves. So empathy versus compassion. Empathy is our ability to take the perspective and feel the emotions of the other person, right? So with empathy, we join their suffering, for lack of a better words. And the line is like, you meet the line before you can actually help them. With compassion, those feelings and the thoughts include the desire to help. So with compassion, we're able to step away from the feelings and ask ourselves, how can we help? There are 4 steps of compassion. So compassion has a 4-step process, and it's important to understand that as it points to where empathy fatigue can happen in our daily lives. So 1, we want to identify the suffering or the negative feelings, whatever those things are, in another person. The second step is to feel or think what that must be like. That's the empathy. The third step is to connect our desire to help, the desire to alleviate suffering. And then the fourth step is to take the action. So that can be our internal actions that help us focus and cope, and deal with all of these heavy feelings, and dealing with the things that we have to hear, and knowing that some of the responsibility to help is on us, that that part of the action can be on us, right? It's the internal action. When this process is seen through completion, so from step 1 to 4, that's when we kind of feel the effects of compassion that we don't get with empathy. So it kind of re-energizes us, right? Some people get stuck at 2. Some people stop at the empathy. And that, when you repeat it over and over and over for many clients over many months and many years, that's when you get to the empathy fatigue and burnout. So this is a learned practice. This is a process that you can start to implement. And we're going to go through some tips and things that you might be able to use to get you from step 2 to step 3. So compassion is those warm, fuzzy feelings, and then the care and concern for other people. And again, the motivation to improve another's well-being. Compassion takes a step beyond feeling what other people feel with them to feeling for them. And it enhances the positive emotions in response to adverse situations. So basically, it makes us feel good right after we feel bad. And because compassion generates those positive emotions, so the feeling good, it counteracts the negative impacts of the bad feelings. So some of the most well-studied techniques for cultivating compassion skills are found in mindfulness meditation programs. Now, I know some people are going to roll their eyes at mindfulness, because who has time to practice mindfulness in the middle of our busy days? But there are some things we can do to make it work. So even with short periods of compassion training, participants will still feel empathy for the other people, but you also gain the capacity to feel those positive emotions without the stress. And that's the key there. You need to make yourself feel good about the position that you're in. You need to, compassion allows you to do something to have those positive feelings come back, so that you're not overwhelming your body's like stress response with all those negative feelings. So there are a few benefits: increased happiness, calmness, acceptance, compassion, connecting with others, decreased stress, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, empathy, fatigue, and burnout. So the way we address empathy fatigue at an organizational level is critical to better serve clients, accomplish the mission of the organization more effectively, increase retention of our workers, lower costs because turnover is not going to be as high, and then we build a stronger, more resilient organization. On an ongoing basis, organizations can support our staff by setting the tone by timely debriefing difficult cases, promoting respectful modes of interacting, frequently complimenting each other's work, and even quick positive feedback can go a long way. Using a strength-based approach in supervision, just like we use strength-based approaches with our clients, and then supporting staff in developing how they manage their own work versus micromanagement. Now, as case managers, if you are not the director, if you're not managing other people, you can do this for yourself. When you are in a supervision meeting, or if you're not having enough, when you've had an extremely difficult case, take a moment to write out that email. Ask for a meeting. If you can't get the meeting, explain what happened. Getting that on paper is a way to debrief for yourself, right? Compliment yourself. If you are not in an environment where you're getting those compliments from your peers and your supervisors, you can do it for yourself. These are the 3 things I did well today. One of the things that my family asks at the dinner table every day is, what's one thing you're proud of that you did today? That's something you can do for yourself. It sounds corny and ridiculous, but it is something that over time makes a big difference. I'm also using that strength-based approach. If you don't have a supervisor that's meeting with you and doing this, you can do that for yourself. This is something I did well. This is something that worked well for my client that I thought of, that I did. That is a way that you can help prevent empathy fatigue, even if your organization isn't doing it at the organizational level. I'm also going to point out secondary traumatic stress. This is basically the negative effect of working in a helping profession where most of our clients, not all of them, have experienced trauma. Um, Vicarious trauma is a negative reaction we have to other people's trauma, and it includes a range of different symptoms, and they can be psychological or they can also be felt physically. Some steps to creating resilience for case managers at the organization. It's a collaborative atmosphere and policies, fostering trust in the agency. So meaning that staff can have safe and open conversations and communication with their supervisors, supporting personal connections, maximizing self-care, and then providing meaningful training and mentoring opportunities. So this is how you counteract some of the effects of that vicarious trauma. And we want to talk about building resilience. So go back to your Mentimeter window, and these questions are going to be in there. Each question is on a different slide. They are open and you can add those. Again, this is information that your community and your agencies can use. When we're talking about training and mentoring opportunities, what would you like to see? Answer that question truthfully, right? Self-care activities. What would you like to see that support your own self-care? What are things that keep you motivated and engaged at your job? What opportunities do you have to collaborate with colleagues and other providers? These are questions that your organizations and the Heartland community can use in general. They can use these responses to develop and meet these needs, but also this can be an exercise for you as a case manager to do on your own if your organization doesn't do things like these. Like, what opportunities do you have to collaborate? Maybe it means at lunch, you and your work BFF are just talking about different resources. You're sharing resources that you have. What keeps you motivated and engaged? That's something that you can make sure you have at the forefront when you're doing your work every day. Maybe it's a quote that you keep on the wall. Maybe it's a picture that gives you some good feelings about the thing that's the reason you do your work, right? If there are not self-care activities supported in your workplace, what can you do? Maybe it's that example where you're scheduling your case management meetings to be shorter so that you have a little time to debrief, enter your notes so that you have time to leave when it's your time to leave. And then training and mentoring, you want to make sure that you have the educational and skills building resources you need to do your job and to do it effectively so that you're not stressed out about it. So go ahead and take a couple minutes to answer those questions. Again, they'll be there. And as a reminder, this is all anonymous. And the people who are organizing the trainings in Heartland, they'll be able to see this and hopefully use it to either continue to create a better workplace or to implement some new strategies for you all. There is a question. Yeah, a couple questions in the chat. Yes, the slides from today will be available. What happens is we provide everything to Heartland House. Heartland House is going to make the slides and the reporting and everything available to folks in the community at a later date. And this is actually the end of our presentation. We wanted to make sure that we left some room for questions or comments. I'll open a new Mentimeter slide in case people want to ask questions anonymously, and as they pop up, we can answer. You can also come off mute, ask a question, leave a comment, you can drop it in the chat. I want to make sure there's some space to clear up anything and answer any questions anyone may have. A couple responses for opportunities to collaborate with colleagues and other providers and outreach events, employee retreats, these kind of meetings and trainings. It looks like other case managers are helpful in sharing tips and working together, and then joining continuing meetings that invite all agencies in the field. It's great to share. It's a great way to share current events and report on resources. And what keeps you motivated and engaged at your job? I will share that for me as a case manager, it was my own experience of homelessness, and like watching my mother go through different programs and not really have her needs met for years and years and years. When I became a case manager, I wanted to make sure that I did things differently, which resulted in a lot of burnout, which is why I'm not a case manager now. It is, I feel like case managers kind of make the world go round, right? And we're underrated and we don't get, the recognition that we should. So I want to take a moment to just acknowledge, the work that y'all are doing and the impact that you are having. Yeah, like literally there was a case manager at every step in my life. That was the difference between me remaining in a cycle of poverty that so many people in my family have endured and being on the other side of the poverty line now. And it has made just significant differences in the outcomes for my little family. And the work you're doing makes a difference. Even if you feel undervalued and nobody's saying it, thank you for the clients who aren't able to say it to you, but you're doing amazing work. So I hope you all find some motivation in someone in the chat said that even small successes are invaluable and make a huge difference. Agreed. And we have some self-care activities popping up once a week, no clients. Oh my gosh, I feel like that would allow so much time for like paperwork and data collection, evaluating things and just getting schedules in order. Someone would like to see an increase in staff to allow case managers more time off and a wider group to support each other. Someone's workplace has weekly meetings and staff trainings, and someone else appreciates when they are checked on and asked about their mental and I guess physical health. All great. And then what other training or mentoring opportunities have you had? What would you like to see? So if there's a specific, like training area you feel that would help you be more effective at your job, or even mentoring that would help you be more effective, make sure you enter that there. And if you have questions, you can enter them on this last slide. So any questions you have, they're again just going to pop up. They won't have your name or anything associated. You can ask them here. If it's something general about like today's training, we can certainly ask them. If it's something specific to maybe policies and procedures or just referrals or the way things work in your specific community, the community will be able to have these questions and see them later, so they can also make sure that they're figuring out answers to that as they plan and prepare. And again, if you can't answer in the Mentimeter, you can also add it to the chat. And we'll have these answers too. And these questions will be up throughout the day. So you can add them now, you can add them later, but you have some time to add them. We'll keep these open a little while. For training and mentoring opportunities, someone would like to see the local shelters train new employees on mental health and substance use principles and how to better serve that demographic. Also, yep, same thing. Mental health and substance abuse courses and discussion groups and having experienced case managers. And they know experienced case managers who are willing collaborators. Some of the strengths that folks said their clients and participants used to overcome challenges were resilience. It looks like that was repeated. And some of the challenges that people often face with clients were clients have a strong level of need, but connecting them with the resources that address those needs take too long. Also getting clear information from clients who suffer from mental illness or substance use disorders. Looks like most people are both uncomfortable and comfortable with addressing conflict when it arises. And wondering maybe that would be a good training opportunity too. And the first question we usually ask to a client experience homelessness or housing insecurity. Just wanted to make sure you all saw the responses to that one. Like we do not have any questions. I don't see any in the chat either. So we are all done for today. We thank you all for your time. Again, if any questions come up about the information we shared, we can add it to the Mentimeter and we will have it there. The Mentimeter will be open until about 5 p.m. Central Time today. So you're closed for business. Again, we thank you for participating. If there are no questions, we will go ahead and end our presentation today.
Thanks so much, Nicole, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks all. Have a great day.
Yep.
Bye-bye.